Coming up, we look back 100 years at a dark moment in a nearby town's history. We speak with one of the finalists for Seminole County's award for the Employee of the Year, and explore a much-needed update for one of our spring sports teams. Stay tuned, you're watching WROR-TV. Good afternoon, Oviedo. I'm Tyler Crush. If you can believe it, this is our final show in the month of February. This past Monday, we asked you to open up a little bit with a slightly more serious question on social media. Let's look back at this week's edition of Tell OHS. Hey Oviedo, it's Tyler here with this week's Tell OHS question. Earlier this week, we asked you to tell us about a time when you did something that you later realized was wrong and how you made amends. This week, we had some of our teachers reply. Miss Krupika says one time she made a new friend, but that friend started texting her all the time and it got to be annoying. She then complained and talked negatively of her to other friends, but she should have been upfront from the start. And Mr. Patterson said there have been many times when he said something ignorant and belittling without grasping the impact of his words. But he says he works to learn, grow, and be more cognizant of his words and their effect going forward. Thanks for your responses. Next week, we'll be looking at pictures of Spring Week. Till then, let's get back to the studio. This weekend marks the end of Black History Month, and while we typically celebrate by looking at the achievements of Black Americans, particularly as it relates to civil rights, it's important that we also bring awareness to the moments of injustice Black Americans have faced, and reflect on how we can learn and evolve as a society. Reporter Davis Cruz is on scene in Ocoee, where late last year, city leaders organized a week-long event honoring the memory of the victims and descendants of a horrific event. Davis?
Thanks, Tyler. Ocoee may just sound like another average small town in Florida, but over 100 years ago, a tragic massacre happened where a group of white men attacked a group of Black Americans who were simply exercising their right to vote.
Black people, I specifically should say, you did not go to Ocoee. We talked with people who lived here like during civil rights in the 50s and 60s say, I didn't know why, but you didn't drive through Ocoee. Our bus driver went around Ocoee. Heaven forbid the bus break down or something happened.
The shoreline of Stark Lake is where the city of Ocoee, just outside of Orlando, was first settled. But for much of the 20th century, this pristine lakefront represented a culture that favored white supremacy. During the election of 1920, Black citizens of Ocoee faced illegal challenges to casting their votes from white poll workers. Two leaders of the Black community, Moses Norman and July Perry, were targeted by a white mob for their efforts to help Black citizens vote. The mob attempted to invade Perry's home in the middle of the night, forcing him to flee. He was found after dawn, lynched, and hung on a telephone pole. But the mob also continued to burn Black churches, schoolhouses, and homes. It's estimated 30 to 35 people died, and many more were driven from the community. No arrests were ever made for their violence.
As you look throughout all of American history, you see a constant and ongoing intentional obfuscation of information when it comes to what gets put in the record books, right? Or into the history books for that matter. And that has so been the case with Black history specifically.
So I brought it up last year at the last school that I was working at Apopka. And they had never even heard of it. And I was thinking, wow, okay, this is only one town over. So when I came here, I thought, these kids are probably already going to have an idea of what the Ocoee Massacre was. I was surprised to learn that they really didn't. It's something that I feel like needs to be talked about more, especially in the Ocoee community and the Orlando community as a whole.
We found with the current exhibition we built, there's so many people who have lived their whole lives in Ocoee and still didn't realize that this event happened there.
But that's beginning to change. Last year, on the 100th anniversary of the massacre, the Florida legislature mandated that schools incorporate it into their history curriculum, and the city of Ocoee held a 5-day event in memory of the victims. But reflection of the massacre isn't focused solely on what happened in 1920. but rather a pattern of brutal racism that continued for more than 5 decades after.
There were members of the white community who would actually kidnap and beat individuals from the Black community and tell them they'd been speaking a little bit too much about what had happened at Ocoee the year before.
If you're at least 50, you were here when it was a sundown town. So the students did have a connection with it, especially if they grew up in the area.
But a culture of bigotry that resided in the shadows for decades is now coming into the light as the city evolves.
It's not, I guess, as tainted as it was before by its history, in the sense that people of color wouldn't live here. Now people of color have moved in, and it's a diverse community. And I think that makes this community a better place to live. The Ocoee that I knew as a child isn't the Ocoee that I know as a 25-year-old adult.
America's history is brutal. If there's 50% greatness, there's also 50% of really difficult and challenging content. That has been the case, and we have to just continue to sort of uncover that and talk about that, unpack that to figure out how it really does impact us today.
And for this Orange County town, they've begun to take steps towards doing just that. For WROR-TV, I'm Davis Cruz.
The exhibit at the Orange County Regional History Center was originally scheduled to end in the coming week, but it has been extended to remain on display until April 4th. Last week, the school board showed up to campus to surprise one of our own, who was named a finalist for the Countywide Employee of the Year. Michelle Tibbetts, our media specialist, is now one of 5 employees in Seminole County Public Schools up for the distinction, and we have her here this afternoon. Ms. Tibbetts, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tyler. I'm glad to be here this morning.
Could you tell us a bit about your journey to becoming part of the staff here at Oviedo?
So that's kind of interesting. I started subbing in Seminole County Public Schools when my children were in 2nd grade, I think. And it just evolved. As they moved on in school, I moved on with them. I was PTA president when they first came here to Oviedo High School, and started subbing pretty much within that first week. I don't think that there's a classroom on this campus that I wasn't in as a substitute teacher. When they graduated in 2016, there was a huge void in my life, and an opportunity presented itself in November, and I took it and said, I'm going to join that staff at Oviedo High School as a parapro working in the media center here.
Tell us a bit about your role and what you've enjoyed about being the media specialist.
So I guess, Tyler, the best thing about being a media specialist here at Oviedo is I get to interact with the kids, not in the classroom. I get to see them in a more casual, relaxed environment. I get to help them select the books that they like to read. I get to give them their lovely test that they like to take or don't like to take. I think that my favorite part is that I get to be here and get to be accessible to them pretty much whenever they need a person.
Finally, what does the distinction of being the finalist for Employee of the Year mean to you? Can you tell us a bit about your reaction and how you felt?
Well, my initial reaction was absolute shock. I never expected that a parapro working in a center that's pretty much not used a whole lot right now during a pandemic would have been selected as one of the finalists. I am honored to be able to represent Oviedo High School. I'm honored to be able to represent my coworkers that put in so many hours, like I do, here every single day, helping our students be the best that they can possibly be.
Ms. Tibbetts, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and congratulations once again.
Thanks, Tyler. I really am glad to be here today.
We will be right back after a quick break for this public service announcement. Thanks to Mia in our Digital Lion Productions class for that very important PSA.
This week has seen a lot of action in sports, with one of our girls' teams making a run deep into the state playoffs. We have all the details on today's O-Town Sports Report.
Hey Oviedo, it's Riley Finnegan here with this week's O-Town update. Tuesday night, girls varsity soccer traveled to Bartram Trail for the regional finals game and unfortunately lost 2-1. A great season nonetheless, with a final record of 15-2-1. Congratulations, girls. On Wednesday night, both boys and girls water polo defeated East River, with the girls winning 16-4 and the boys 8-4. Laurel Cupid had 10 saves in goal for the girls, and Josh Howell scored 3 points to lead the boys. Varsity softball hosted Lyman also on Wednesday. Reporter Dorian Martinez was there for the highlights.
Due to an amazing pitching performance from Catherine Buckner, the Lions were able to hold the Greyhounds for the majority of the game. After a hit from Angeli Bueno, the Lions were able to load up the bases after 2 more walks. The Lions were able to score 1 run after a ground ball from Ava Bassani. They were able to score again after a ground ball from Lexi Phillips. With the Lions down 3-2 with 2 outs in the bottom of the 7th, Riley Fennell hit a walk-off 2-run home run to triumph the Greyhounds 4-3.
Tennis faced off against Seminole, and the boys lost 7-0 while the girls won 6-1. Number 2 singles Allison Bell came from behind to win in a tiebreak 9-8. Girls varsity lacrosse hosted Lyman and won 17-2. That's all for sports. Now back to the studio.
Every one of the sports teams here at Oviedo has somewhere to play, but one of our teams has had a less than ideal surface to play on in recent years. In the past year, we've seen updates to our stadium turf and our gymnasium floor, and now it's the tennis team's turn. For more on why marred concrete may impact this sport more than others, here's reporter Devin Kanata.
Take a drive down Pine Street and you'll notice a new color scheme for Oviedo High's tennis courts. The courts were recently repaved to repair a surface that had been tarnished with cracks for years.
If anybody's watched Land Before Time, you know, where like it gets ridiculously hot and all the ground starts to just dry up and you see like the little like patties, like that's what our courts look like. And any sort of crack in tennis is rough. It turns more into like an agility drill and reaction drill rather than actually playing tennis.
They have random cracks on them that go like throughout the span of the whole court. There's sand in random areas.
And like the green pavement of it would like come up onto your hands and shoes, so it was just everywhere by the time you were done. And like it just felt really rough and like you couldn't get a good grip with your feet.
While the courts have been repaved in recent weeks, a portion of the pavement still has to be redone to repair some bubbling on the courts 3 and 4. In the meantime, the team is playing its home matches at Round Lake Park, where they no longer have to feel apologetic to visiting teams.
I used to just say like, look, I know there are cracks on both sides. I know it's unsafe, but it's the best that we have. It's on both sides of the court, so it goes both ways.
You could just tell when people got there, especially the 2 courts that were really bad, they didn't want to be there. They kind of looked at it funny and they would sit and laugh. And it was just kind of, not embarrassing, but it just wasn't right that all these other schools have these great courts and we didn't.
But smooth surfaces aren't just for appearances. If a ball takes an unexpected bounce, it can dictate the results of the game.
There was this time I was playing a match and it was really close and this girl hit a shot and it hit the crack and it went like the complete opposite way, and I remember having to like scramble to get to it to get it back in play, and she just kept hitting that same crack over and over again.
I lost this point because of the ball bouncing on one of those cracks, and unpredictably it went off to the side rather than straight at me, and I blew the match.
There was this one time during my match 2 years ago, I think, I stepped in some sand and I slipped and fell like in the middle of my game.
Tennis is a lot of really quick fractions of a second reaction in anticipation of how the ball's going to spin and then how is it going to bounce and how far is it going to bounce and how high. And without a reliable court surface, none of those things happen. It's fundamental to the sport. It's like if you tried to play basketball on cobblestone. It's not how it was meant to be played.
And for the players, it's not just about having a reliable playing surface, but a chance to finally experience the feeling of a home court advantage.
For the longest time, I feel like our courts haven't felt like our own courts, but now that they've been redone and they've been resurfaced and recolored, now they have the Oviedo line colors, and it's just really nice to have the whole color blending in with the school spirit.
It's my senior year, so it's kind of nice to hopefully, if they finally get them done, to be able to play on them this year. And I think it's really cool that there are school colors this year to really represent Oviedo.
For WROR-TV, I'm Devin Kanata.
That's all we have for you today, Oviedo. A reminder, next week is Spring Week, and Monday's theme is USA Day. Come dressed in red, white, and blue, and anything else patriotic. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Tyler Crush. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday.